Hey everyone, what is up with the Force? We are getting a heavy dose of it in the Acolyte compared to the hints that we've gotten in drips and dribbles since Obi-Wan first explained the Force to Luke back in episode 4. What's brilliant about what George Lucas did in his original trilogy is that he laid out the basic elements of the Star Wars storyverse, putting stakes in the ground that were incredibly solid and agile, creating this structure upon which the logic of his force-based science could exist and spin out into various religions and mythologies and politics and power structures. And they solidify the force as a natural science like physics or biology, which means it can be studied, used, and manipulated in ways that are understandable and reproducible. Every Star Wars film and series to date has set up new or reinforced existing force-focused plot points that either float around independently or make some small story connections within their story. With the Acolyte, the Force has formally been established as a natural science within the Star Wars universe, connecting all those Force-focused plot points together that were either shaded dark for evil or light for good, as well as the shades of gray, bringing the Force together into a set of understandable scientific principles. It's been well established that the Jedi reside in the light and the Sith in the dark sides of the Force. But from day one, back in 1976, all we ever heard about the Force is that it needs to be in balance and that it seeks to find balance within the galaxy. Anyone who has ever tried to balance a set of scales knows that you cannot balance if you concentrate all your weight in one area. And that's what the Jedi have been doing. Since this dynamic naturally creates an imbalance in the Force, are the Jedi now concentrating the dark side balance into a handful of systems as the physics of the Force try to find balance in those gray areas? You have got to have a phased distribution of power between the light and the dark sides of the Force. And that also means a distribution of Force sensitives who reside along those gray areas. This has been long established in past series that feature the Night Sisters of Dathomir and the Clone Wars, the monks in Rogue One, and Bendu and the space whales in Star Wars Rebels. What we are now seeing in the Acolyte is how these gray area Force users tap into and use the Force. This series gives us a look behind the midichlorian curtain to understand that the Force isn't a spectrum of light and dark that tilts good in one direction and bad in the other direction. From the very first trilogy, we were exposed to the idea that there can be light in the darkness and darkness in the light, again with the gray areas. And this is why Luke felt goodness in his father. It's why Rey can be a Jedi when her grandfather was a master Sith Lord and she's tempted in that direction. And it's why Osha and May's mother talk about these threads rather than light and dark. For her, the threads are the shades of gray within the Force. For a really long time, we've looked at the Force as a gradient linear scale that measures the amount of white light or dark light in the universe, which is basically like measuring the good and the bad within the universe. However, the Force isn't linear, so that scale doesn't work. We know that because there is darkness in Luke and lightness in Vader, and that is a core principle of Star Wars. Now, think about this. If the Force truly does permeate everything, then it would have to be represented by a 3D spectrum of light that connects light to dark and dark to light, which is best represented by the shape of a wheel or a sphere, with the Force sensitives plotted throughout the field of light. But dark and light are not necessarily the equivalent of black and white. It's not that clean, especially when we're talking about a light spectrum. It's made of color. It's colorful. While dark and light might equate to good uses and bad uses of the Force, I think the color wheel ties into how the Force is accessed, either through reason and training or through emotional or impulsive reactions to it. The more I talk about this, the more it feels like the Force is just kind of a Star Wars version of the Myers-Briggs test that plots out the Force and the Force sensitives on a much more dynamic map, which gets us back to the psychology and the science of the Force and the mad scientists led by Dave Filoni, who are conducting the equivalent of scientific research in a galaxy far, far away and showing us their papers in the form of digital content to prove that their hypothesis and formulas are real. This is all coming to a head in the Acolyte, and the real question for this series, beyond whether or not you like the story, is can Dave Filoni pull it off? Can this master thesis of his on the Force come together, or will he tie it too tightly to the storyline of the Acolyte, which is already struggling to hold its own weight because they aren't doing enough character development to make the series as compelling as it should be to stand up next to the other series and films within the Star Wars universe. And if done right, it could impact the new films featuring Rey and the post-Rise of Skywalker era. The last point brings me back to my own writing mentor's advice. When in doubt about a storyline, go deeper and find out why it ticks and why it matters. And that's what this series needs to do in the upcoming episodes. If viewers don't see why something matters in the opening foray of episodes, they will assume that nothing matters and they will move on to something else, or they're going to tear it apart. And that is all I have for you today. And I hope that the Acolyte actually does shape up in the following episodes. I hope that we do dig deeper. I hope that we get to see further character development, because it would be a real shame if this series doesn't fulfill its promise. And right now it's right on the edge of not quite doing that. I hope you've enjoyed this video about the Force, even if you might not necessarily agree with it. In fact, if you don't agree, I want to hear from you and I want to know why. What do you think I got wrong? What do you think I got right? What's missing? And what do you think still needs to be established to kind of make it all make sense? The absolute best thing about Star Wars, and I will stand by this thought, is that all of these new series, all of these new stories, all of these new films, it gives us something to come together and talk about, something fun and fictional that we can chat about in serious and insightful ways that really matter to us. Okay, that's it for now. Please do give this review a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. Thanks so much, everybody. I'll see you later. Bye.